Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another awesome, fun show today. This is the 401 Access Denied podcast. You have myself, Joseph Carson, located here in Tallinn, Estonia. It's a long time since I've been traveling. I actually think it's now the longest period of time I've been in Estonia, nonstop without travel. But really happy to have another exciting show for you today. We have an exciting guest on which we'll introduce you to shortly. So my name is Joseph Carson, Chief Security Scientist at Thycotic and Advisory CISO to several governments and critical infrastructure around the world. I basically am located here in Estonia, and my co-host of today is the awesome Mike. So Mike, do you want to give us a little bit of background about you?
Yeah, sure. Mike Rowan, VP of Engineering and CISO at Cybrary, located in DC. And really excited about today's episode. And we have Chris Kubecka joining us, who's also helps out around the place with Cybrary and our content as well. So really, really glad to have her on with us.
And I am Chris Kubecka, and I love OT. I got interested at an early age because my mother was a robotics programmer for assembly line manufacturing in the automobile industry. And I love the idea that you can take technology in bits and bytes and make things move. And who doesn't want to move the world, right? I do. Some of the things that I'm working on right now is I do advisory service for several governments as well, also NATO and the United Nations. And I'm currently working on a very interesting project for part of the European Union to set up a purely proactive security team to hopefully avoid major incidents from occurring, because once you get to the CERT level, that means it's very reactive, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Yay, emergency, great, put them out, oh no. And instead we're setting up a prevention team to hopefully minimize some of those incidents. So.
Interesting. That proactive is a key word there because
yes.
we're so used to, in the security industry, we are such a reactive people. We are the firefighters of security. We tend to only respond when things happen, rather than. And one thing I remember, I every year I attend the CERT symposium events here in Estonia, and one thing that's always missing from those events is never talking about the proactive side of things, never talking about even the successes. We don't even like talking about successes because we don't want to put ourselves out there in a target. So I'm really interested. That's a very key area, is really proactively looking at defenses and mitigating risk against OT. So Chris, you want to mention about what is really the proactive side? What does it entail?
Well, what it entails is gathering a lot of different pieces of information and putting them together, verifying the data that you get, as well as using your trust networks, both formal and informal. I'm a big believer in informal trust networks, such as various volunteer technology groups. One in particular, the CTI League, Threat Intelligence League, where they've been proactively defending hospitals and some medical workers because CERTs just don't have the capacity. And some countries may have a CERT, but they're not a very mature CERT. For instance, Tanzania, where I used to spend a lot of time, they've got a CERT website, which isn't encrypted, and they don't have a CERT team. Yay! Wow. And that's, awesome, because they do a lot of mining of things like gold and rare earths and plutonium and uranium, little things that other people might want to get a hold of. And most CERTs don't really have the time to be very proactive because, again, they're putting out the fires. And if you can, kind of flip the script and try to alleviate some of that, then it's my personal belief that you will see a lot more countries as a whole be able to make their cyberspace safe.
So maybe for those who don't know, we've mentioned a couple terms, OT and CERTs. Maybe we should, introduce those or what those are. Chris or Jeff?
Absolutely. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah.
Operational technology. Now, it might seem like this foreign, strange set of words, and you're like, oh, but I don't know what any of that is. Well, it can be something as like a power station. It could be your water system, so that when you get water out of your tap, it is actually clean, just not in Detroit. It could be planes, trains, and automobiles. For instance, one of the things I'm glad about living in the Netherlands is we're the second largest food exporter in the world for a country of 17 million. There's a reason why. It's because our agriculture is top-notch technology-wise, but it's OT. So you've got robotics, you've got drones, you've got automated systems, all functioning in a very, very small space, because trust me, the Netherlands is kind of small, and able to do these magnificent things because of technology. And that's actually OT, operational technology. It can be security stations in police stations, in hospitals, in private security companies. It could be portions of a lab as part of, say, a smart hospital, because everything's got to be smart, right? And all of these different systems that are set up even to control things and do things with a series of programs. If you have this fancy schmancy espresso machine like I do, I got one a few years ago, best choice ever. It's set up to control, move, and do with a series of programs. So I've got a piece of OT in my house right now. So it can be from really big to really, really small. It's all around us.
Yes, and absolutely. Some of the things, even back to some people don't realize as they're walking and doing their day-to-day jobs in life, is all the things around us. From the street lights.
Yeah, traffic lights.
Traffic lights. So when they come on, how frequent. Even here in Estonia, is that during the summertime, it's every second light that they have to reduce costs, and then at wintertime they change it based on seasonal because it gets darker here. So they also have it programmed and automated to really deal with the light and what time and season it is. Even things like conveyor belts. When you get into you go to the airport and your baggage comes out, all of that in the background is all automated basically through OT. Elevators, you get in. I think it's escalators and elevators and lifts in UK. Just trying to get the right term so our international audience gets to know what we're talking about. But even when you get into an elevator, all the controls, everything from the stop to floors, is all through OT. Everything that we do, from basically car-to-car communication, weather systems, sensors, it's all around us, and we sometimes take it for granted. Yes. But what's really now happening is that the impact and the significance of it is becoming more into not just providing the city around us and the functionality, but also it's now becoming more into our homes as well, with things like your espresso machines, or your vacuum cleaners, or your light bulbs, or your home security system, your automation. Everything we look at automation as well. That's really playing a part in OT. And I remember even back, some of the projects I worked on from even the early days, which was in around 1999. So yeah, I'm pretty old in this industry, even go back further than that. But in 1999, one of the things that I was working on, it was when Nokia phones became really popular. And they first came out with a data connection through edge computing, and you connect them. And one of the first things that we had done with that technology was we actually, I was responsible for the ambulance service in Northern Ireland. And we put into the ambulances defibrillators and EPGs. And we connected those to mobile phones. And when an accident happened, basically, the patient or victim got into the ambulance. They were put on those readers, machines, and all that heart ratings. That was all sent back through a fax, through those mobile phones, back into the emergency room, so that doctors could already analyze the patient before they got there. And these are some of the life-saving benefits. If a doctor can already analyze prior to them arriving, 5-10 minutes, that can make a big difference to saving someone's life. So this is what we see a lot. And I think it's really important. And one of the other things that, Chris, you mentioned about the CERT teams, you want to also mention what CERTs are as well.
So CERT is a computer emergency response team. And somebody set off fireworks. And
a bit late for 4th of July, isn't it?
Well, you never know with the Dutch. They love their fireworks. Love them. Pull up a picture of, Amsterdam during New Year's, and it looks like a war zone, basically. But CERTs are very interesting. It started with Carnegie Mellon back in the day. And nowadays, there was the UN loves these acronyms, GGE, a group of governmental experts wrote a report July 2015, 5 years ago, Report H, that said, hey, we like this idea of these computer emergency response teams, but we also like the idea that states have to take some sort of active role to defend their ICT and critical infrastructure. So we're going to get the states to agree, member states, that every member state should have a computer emergency response team. And if there's some major issue with critical infrastructure and one country could use the help of another country, whether it be data or technology or people, we'll use our formal networks under various lovely treaty names to get that information and those people and those resources. And that looks great on paper, right? Happy, fun time. And it's all magic. And it will
because the world loves to cooperate with each other. All the countries really love cooperating.
All the countries.
Yes.
Right?
We like sharing information.
Especially ones that share borders. There's a lot of cooperation.
Right? And by the way, what you hear right now is our automated street cleaning system. Which has decided to park outside my window. I love living in a city. But a couple of weeks ago, the UN asked me to look at that report and speak on, what some of the current challenges are and how they should more, say, rapidly share information. And again, this can be kind of difficult. If Iran is on fire, which it is, right? I don't think that Saudi Arabia is going to go, yay, let's help out, right? However, if you use informal networks, such as the CERT networks and technologists, you can actually get through that level of bureaucracy. But what I told the UN was a CERT is fantastic. Step one, and step two, obviously try to mature those certs, right? Awesome. But by the time it gets to that cert level, you've already got a major problem. So you need to also look at the preventative focus and to already have those trust relationships built. Because it's one thing, again, with this lovely formal treaty system, it's another thing if someone can pick up the phone and say, I have the information that you need, and it doesn't take 2 weeks for the paperwork.
I completely. One of the things that I got involved really early in this whole, because based in Estonia, back in 2007, of course, we had the famous nation-state cyber attack against the government here, and even local companies that were targeted. And one of the things that kind of evolved was the community came together. We created back then, which was basically the Kaiser League, which is the Cyber Defense League, which was basically citizens who were experts in their field came together in the defense of the country, and really helping things like DDoS prevention, doing hardening of websites and companies' defenses. And it really evolved into that. The Cyber Defense League became a continuous operating hand. Now it's an official group in Estonia that really is there to come to the defense of the country when it comes under attack. And of course, that evolved in Estonia out of the Estonian CERT as well, is also part, that came out of that, which is more the official group that's there to react to things that target the country. And then the volunteers that are, as additional resources when they become inundated under a major attack. So I think it's really important. One of the things I'm always questioned is that those defense leagues should not be part of an offensive team. That should always be part of the official government, but they should be always there to help the countries out when it comes under. And this is also what we've done recently under the pandemic as well. I'm part of the Cyber Volunteers 19, which is there to help defend the medical infrastructure as well. And this really gets into that. It's about, to your point, Chris, about sharing information. It's about if you see something early, somebody else can make use of that in order to mitigate it. And I think that's one of the ultimate responsibilities that we have, is to make sure that if there's a 0-day or a vulnerability, that other people have the ability to make the decision to, eradicate that risk. And it even gets into some of the things. I don't know whether the policy or the standard you're working on has resulted from. I know that in 2007, 2008, we worked on what was called then was the Talon Papers. Yep. Which ultimately, also then Brad Smith from Microsoft came out with the Geneva Convention, version of the same thing, which I agree is because one of the most important things we should have is sharing information. because it means that if we have more cooperation and transparency, it means that cyber criminals, the real cyber criminals who are acting on, basically malicious motivation, have less places to hide, less places to operate. And this can then hold, if you have some type of Geneva Convention, then you have some type of accountability. You can hold countries responsible for failure to prevent their citizens from doing attacks in other countries. And this is really kind of where I think that absolutely some of the work that you're mentioning seems to be along the later stages of what that early discussions were.
Yeah. No, prevention is important so that we don't have a critical infrastructure digital attack pandemic. I had to use the word.
And I think that's the important part, right? Like I think, we started talking about all the different systems that, OT touches, right? From your latte machine, which, if somebody if somebody were to attack your coffee maker, that's one thing. Somebody
I would die.
Well, that's true. You would. But what would happen if they hit your power station, right? And then all of your neighbors. So then your coffee machine still doesn't work, and you don't have electricity.
And we've seen that happening. That's the thing, is that we've failed to act on some of the most major incidents of OT in the past.
Right.
I understand from a Stuxnet perspective, it was very targeted,
right.
But we look at Ukraine. Ukraine is basically being the testing, target of a lot of OT type of attacks.
Right.
And so we look at, 2015 December, they lost electricity to 200,000 citizens. And there's always an indirect impact. That one of the things is, so Chris, I've categorized OT into two things. One is that you've got OT, which is data driven, and you've got OT, which is kinetic driven. So the OT, it actually is the sensors that's gathering things like weather or population movement, or really that data analytical side to make quick decisions based on things that can improve efficiencies, whether it being water flows into, or water pressure or electricity. Then you get into the kinetic classification, which is OT that actually has moving parts, things that actually can damage, whether it being a furnace that is basically releasing steam and opening up that steam so that it doesn't overheat and cause damage. So those are two types of classifications. And of course, when you have electricity, that has a kinetic output as well. You've got hospitals that no longer have electricity. Ultimately, the one thing that when I was working in ambulance service, the one thing that kept me up at night was the potential of my systems potentially not running, and ultimately having a death as a result, having human fatalities. So, Chris, do you want to kind of give us what's some of the things we should be worried about? What's some of the risks?
Yeah, scare us, please.
Yes. All right. Scary time.
Give me something to tell the kids at night.
Yes. Ooh. So, we have come to the point where we can no longer function as a modern society without OT, ICT, and the digital world. Even when I've visited different parts of East Africa where you don't think these things are affected, at the same time, in order to do money transactions, you'll use the M-Pesa system, which most people don't have bank accounts still, right? So how do you get paid? So we're absolutely dependent on these things. And some of the research I've been doing, especially since the pandemic, I got to say it's scary. Pandemic is
with a Darth Vader voice or something,
right?
We'll do that in post,
right? Is the fact that it's accelerated both ICT and OT and different forms of OT to be turned into remote services more and more, and that sounds like a great thing. However, it's not particularly a great thing if these things are rolled out very quickly. And they are using protocols that they shouldn't be using, technology that they shouldn't be using. I mean, obviously, we still want our power to run if people have to be isolated, but we also don't want there to be a problem with, say, a nuclear power plant or something along that line, right? And some of the recent scans use ZMAP, the ZMAP project, where it can scan the internet in about 15 minutes, depending on how nice my ISP is. And what I found is there's been a stark increase in these connected systems being set up with highly vulnerable, with known exploits in a very, very hasty manner. And one of the recent scans that I did was I was looking at the top 10 countries with both ICT and OT, one and all, systems connected to the internet. The United States has almost, 48 million assets. And China does not have as many, but is kind of close. And what I found was zeroing in on just known, exploitable, vulnerable remote protocols in use, 59% of China's ICT infrastructure has these known exploitable vulnerabilities. The United States is sitting at 26%. And so it's kind of disturbing because unfortunately human nature is go, 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 go. Oh, something happened. Whoops. Sorry about that.
And I think a lot of it is people are right. There's these systems that were never designed to be on the internet. They were designed either before that was really a thing, or in that with the idea that there'd be an air gap, or all of these other things. And so
air gap.
Right.
Sorry, I was coughing.
I know exactly because I think we talked to Josh Lespinoza who about cyber warfare, and I can't remember. I've talked to him several times. He's also a friend. But where we talked about like, hey, if your protection is an air gap, like that's awesome from an attack perspective. Like, great, all I have to do is close that gap and I win. So, but in any event, so I think there's because of all of that, these systems that were never designed to be on the internet, this rush to suddenly get them on the internet, and I think in that rush, people don't necessarily even think to look at this thing like it's. What are the protocols? What are the things that are going to be suddenly, one step away from being attacked now, whereas maybe it was 2 or 3 steps before.
Yeah, we have to remember, there is no such thing as air gap. Where humans go, where we can be the link between the air gaps. So we even look at potential how Stuxnet get into an intense reactor was basically most likely human walking it in the door. So I will say is where humans work and where we operate, there's no such thing as an air gap, because you might assume that it's network segmentation, but we can actually bring in things as humans. And it reminds me, this reminds me of a fun story. So one of the search engines we use, of course, is Shodan, which of course is basically there to do, search for machines on the internet with different ports and protocols. And I remember, number of years ago doing a penetration test on a shipping company. And one of the things we got surprised, we got shocked. One of the things we actually found on the search was actually one of the ship's navigation system was actually appearing on the public internet. And this should not be possible. They're meant to go through the VSAT systems up to the satellites and back into headquarters. And we were just wondering, how is this even possible? It should not be possible. It should not be happening. So eventually when we end up getting into actually, finding out what happened. So what happened was during these long voyages at sea, the captain of the vessel, I won't say his nationality or get them in trouble, but what he wanted to do was he was to spend more time in his cabin on the internet speaking with his family. But he also wanted to be able to actually see where the route that the vessel was going, the speed and navigation and so forth. So one of the ports, he actually went and got a long internet cable, plugged it into the Ectis navigational system, took the wire all the way down into his cabin, plugged it into his laptop. So one of the things was when he wanted to, because there was a law in 2009, which was called the sea welfare law, that meant that they had to have internet at sea and all these things, and so they had to have connectivity and communication. So the crew on the vessel now had internet access since 2009. And every time he made a Skype call to his family, he had actually created a crossover from his laptop onto the actual ship's navigation and engine room, so he could sit and see the destination of the vessel, but at the same time communicate with his family. And this was really ultimately, breaking that air gap system. And actually, were systems that were not designed to be on the public internet through human error and human, of course, of wanting to simplify things and make our lives better, ultimately put a vessel at risk, because any malicious actor who did that search, and ultimately the only thing it was protecting it was a 4-digit PIN, and we know how easy they are to get past. And ultimately, it could have meant an attacker could have made that vessel look like it was somewhere else or changed its direction. And these vessels, these ships, it takes 1 to 2 miles for them to turn and stop.
Right.
So these are things that that increase the impact. So I think it's really important. A lot of these areas is mostly through human errors as well and configuration mistakes, and that's some of the things we also have to be. And a lot of these systems are also meant to have long lifespans. I remember watching a satellite decommissioning.
Yeah,
that was impressive. Where basically one button that was designed 25, 30 years ago, that they were hoping that the button still did what it was meant to be doing
right.
when they pushed it. And they also had to, make sure the fuel was emptied at the right time, and that they moved it to a so-called satellite parking lot in space, where they move it out to a certain orbit. And it was really interesting that, this was designed to be in operation for 20 years, and it already passed 25 years.
And don't forget that they have a technology cutoff date of several years prior to it even launching or going into, so who knows how old the actual technology was.
It was 30 plus years old
right.
Because you're absolutely right, because the time before that even got, sent off in space, there was a time frame, of course, testing and validating and making sure it worked. And that took years, that whole life cycle. And this is what we really face, is that with OT, they tend to be old, vulnerable, out of date, not patched, using legacy. I can't tell you how many times I've seen XP still running, even 2000 and NT running in some of these systems.
Oh, wait, should I stop running XP?
Depends what you're using it for, really. So Chris, what's some of the risks? Yeah, what's some of the risks that you see in OT? I know the potential damage could be significant.
Yes,
but what's the risk? What's the failures that we have out there?
Well, I think we also have to look at the supply chain and vendors. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. I think it was my 4th or 5th nuclear event.
Mm-hmm. Starting off hilarious.
Awesome. Right? And I was called in to look at a nuclear facility because part of the system that automatically raised and lowered nuclear fuel rods, one of them had failed. And what they had discovered was, although it was a pretty new system at the time, the vendor had actually installed a 2G modem into the system without telling them, with a public IP address. And they obviously were very scared that somebody hacked into it and caused the system to fail. Mm-hmm. Luckily, there were no rods in the system. Great. And turns out the vendor's response was like, well, yeah, we didn't document it, but basically we thought it would be a value add. Another word for, we were testing it on you in this nuclear facility. Right. Whoops. And they also told the facility that if they disabled it, then they would void their warranty.
Right.
Yes. Because fun fact, a lot of vendors, if you have a maintenance warranty, they want the data from your system, right? And they will go, hey, everyone, let's tie all of our customers into this really old version of VNC to remote in with like no password, no encryption, or just use the same credentials of admin or tech on all of our customers.
Admin password is my favorite, but yeah.
Awesome. And you're like, but can I like update this? No, you void your warranty. You're like,
I've seen that with so many manufacturer contracts these days, especially when we're working on the power stations and shipping, where you've got engines that you're purchasing. Even the Tesla model is the same model. When you go and you buy those equipment, you're actually owning the physical equipment, but the warranty and the maintenance is tied to them owning the data. If you actually look into those contracts, you must provide them data. And in many cases, as you're saying, it's actually online connected data. And rather than saying it's offline, but we'll extract it and give it to you when we need to, that these are connected. And I seen the same with a ship management company that were actually the third-party vendor was using VNC to remote in and look at the systems. And you're just going, what? where does your security start and end?
Yeah, no, it was just never a thought. No. I mean, I do understand that we also have to remember that the internet was never designed for security in the first place. Yeah. And many times these systems, whether the hardware, the software, or the integration, the people who design them are designing them for valid, legitimate use. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking about people like us who might want to be a little bit evil, right? And, it's I sometimes wonder why I'm on this side of the discussion instead of being perhaps a Lamborghini owning cyber criminal, because there's so much potential.
Right.
And I could have paid off my house by now.
It's called morals and ethics.
That's right.
Well,
that's my weakness. My evil is being moral and ethical.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about never being designed for this, like I remember a long time ago, I read Dealers of Lightning, which is sort of the story of Apple and Microsoft and the internet, and well, it's actually really the story of HP. Was it Xerox PARC. So it's the story of Xerox PARC and the start of and all of that. And they were sort of talking about like email. And I remember the story in there of like, well, what, like it never occurred to anyone to secure email because like what kind of evil monster would impersonate someone else in a message like that? Because it was designed by academics, for academics. These are just things that you don't think about. Exactly. Yeah. I'm at least heartened by the fact that I think things have changed. I think we do think about security from day one on a lot of stuff. Unfortunately, we're building on top of so much stuff where that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right, is that we're doing, the security gets entered at the wrong stage. Sometimes it's not by design, it's afterthought. Yeah. And it's your point. One of the things, even we look at email. Email. When I started using email back in '93, whatever it was really just a simple message. It was you took a note, you send it, and you send it to a colleague. But today, it's so much more than that. It's your digital footprint. It's everything you do. It's all you use. It's your location information, your address.
It's your password manager.
Your password manager.
Essentially,
so you send reminders to yourself with the password saying my password. Oh, that's what it is.
Oh no, I just meant for the forgot password.
Reset passwords.
That's right. The password reset. Right.
Some people are storing their passwords in their emails.
Right.
Awesome.
but this is what it's always an afterthought. Sometimes even the tools and solutions that we create, the purpose changes as well. The intent, and also means that sometimes it bypasses the traditional security methods that we apply. So Chris, what things would you recommend? How what is the way forward? What is the solutions, or what is the ways to reduce the risk in this?
Well, I would say educating, especially the larger companies who deal a lot with critical infrastructure, or even property owners who own lots of buildings and things of that nature, right? Because they've got a lot of these different systems, is their project managers, procurement, and legal department get a basic level of security so that they can look at, yes, they want to go for the lowest bidder, but what is the risk associated with that? Mm-hmm. Yes, they want to sign this contract, but how is it going to bite them in the bum, right? And so those parties start getting included in the discussion, because otherwise a lot of things won't change. The project manager, and I've heard this before at a particular bank, who would create those algorithms for fast trading and an exotic market. And the discussion was, hey, we actually need to security test these. And the project manager is like, no, I didn't budget for it. I don't see what the need is. Then the next question is, do you know what these algorithms do? No, nobody knows anymore.
Right.
Awesome.
We completely forget the purpose.
Right? So if, in the beginning, there isn't that discussion going on with, maybe somebody could do this. Maybe we'll, get our stuff hacked, or we'll be put on the news, or we'll have to hire an outside PR firm, or we'll go out of business and we'll have to lay off all of our employees.
Well, that's what I think is interesting, is the larger organizations, I think, can deal with it better. They have more money to put into marketing and other things. You look at, just history has shown that they don't get punished nearly as much as companies that are a little bit smaller, that get, that just don't have that, those are the ones that go out of business. The larger ones, can solve it with PR, which is, I think, even more unfortunate because it doesn't put the responsibility in the right place.
But Chris, do you think things like GDPR and regulations or standards that's coming out have an impact to companies that are larger? Because now, if they do have a breach, and we've seen GDPR being hit with the likes of British Airways and Marriott hotels with their reservation systems with serious financial penalties. Do you think regulation will influence these companies to make a change?
I think there needs to be a certain level of regulation, but at the same time, when you put forward regulation, you also have to ask the question, how much do you want to pay for your water to secure that water infrastructure? Is a hospital going to have to choose between ventilators or securing its ICT?
Right.
So it also has to be done in a way that it's economical and people understand what the end costs are actually going to be.
I'm also super cynical because in the United States, a lot of that legislation is going to be written by not the people you want writing that legislation. And so that's how you end up with, or technologists that work for the companies. Like that's how you end up with these situations where it's totally legal for a company to say, no, you can't tamper at all with this device. You do anything and it voids the warranty. And it's because there's laws in the US that sort of allow for that. And who wrote those laws, you can trace it back. It's just
even recently the news that came out and it was around that making vendors, making sure that they don't have easy to guess passwords. And I'm just going, who's putting these together? Who's coming up with these policies and rules and regulations and standards? Because what it means is that the vendor will actually create a more difficult, to guess password, but it's going to be the same in all devices.
Right.
It's going to be the one,
or it's going to be just a standard pattern that's pretty easy to just,
and it will be publicly available,
within minutes.
Exactly. So one of the things is I think is definitely better collaboration with experts. So having people like yourself, Chris, in part of those discussions and helping direct the outcomes.
Yeah, one of the things I've been advising several governments here in the European Union and also the UN is. It's great to have, and obviously we need health boards that advise the government made up of experts, right? But you also need technology boards that have an advisory role with an actual voice that aren't just academics. And I have to stress that because they don't think the way that an evil hacker does.
Right.
You have to have subject matter experts. You have to have also components of legal and procurement and certain things like that. Because all of them tie in. Just as we plan for various other emergencies, we also have to face the fact that we have to plan for some sort of magic bingo word, cyber emergency, right? Because otherwise, Joseph and I have seen what happened at Saudi Aramco. And there were, wide-ranging effects that happened beyond just the company. They actually provided 2/3 of the mobile internet infrastructure. When they disconnected, it affected the rest of the country. They also provided the network, which was on their flat network, internet and connectivity to a lot of hospitals, police stations, emergency, like fire department and ambulances and so forth. And guess what? That was kind of turned off.
Right.
So we have to realize that something that can happen in a company can have these wide-ranging effects.
Catastrophic rippling effects and others.
Right.
Yeah, we absolutely have to consider those.
I think there's also needs to be just planning for the inevitable there's no way to 100% protect against that. And so making sure that you have some sort of government action plan. What are you going to do when the power shuts off and you have all these hospitals and being able to respond to that quickly?
I think one of my favorite ones is, I think it's the CDC and the U.S. Army that both have public plans on how to plan against zombie takeovers, right?
Right.
And so you can read both of their plans, and they're pretty kind of funny and cool. But they figure, if you plan for the absolute worst, you should be prepared.
Do they take different approaches for the zombie? I imagine the Army is more about just
a little bit different,
more
right?
a little offensive,
right?
less looking for the cure and looking to repurpose them,
right? But they don't have any of these plans put forward for what happens if there is a worm that goes around and hits a lot of these legacy devices using some of these protocols. I remember the Carna worm that did something like this back in the day, way back in the day. Must have been before I was born. And some of these things can operate on themselves like a virus, going everywhere and infecting everything. And then suddenly you don't have internet. So how are the rest of us who are being, kind of safe and trying to work from home going to be able to work from home if we don't have any internet? How am I going to get other services? I'm in the Netherlands. There is no place in the Netherlands I cannot get internet, and I will die without it. But literally, we have to consider all of the OT that is absolutely dependent also on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things is that you look at the most necessity needs that everyone has today is one is battery and internet access. Where would we be without Google answering all of our questions?
DuckDuckGo. We should be using
DuckDuckGo. We should be using for privacy. But absolutely, I think it's crucial to know that we're so it's so dependent and so entwined to everything that we do. Most people don't have hardline telephones anymore. We're all dependent on mobile communications, and without internet, mobile communications would not function. And even it reminds me of a great book that I read a number of years ago, one of my favorites, which was Cyberstorm, which is all about basically this entire it's the catastrophic event of basically being without electricity. We look at if electricity fails in a major city, the basically just-in-time delivering, just-in-time manufacturing, they would run out of food and supplies within 24 to 48 hours. We've even seen the recent pandemic is that when you don't have logistics systems working and be able to function and operate with efficiency, that things and shops go out of stock very quickly. Hence, people is probably sitting around in massive amounts of toilet paper right now as a result of some of those things. But this is really is that the whole setup we have in that just-in-time supply chain, which becomes so critical, even fuel supplies to medical supplies as well, which we're facing right now, a lot of those challenges. They're all connected. And this book actually goes through some of those examples. It's a great read, and I'd highly recommend it. It's fictional, of course, but it gives you that.
Yay, for now.
Right, for now. Right, and I think that's one of those things that how much OT relies on other OT relies on other OT. Even talking about you're talking about the split between the kinetic and then the sensors, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Even if I were to secure some of the kinetic side of things, if I go after the sensors, if I change what maybe weather information is being fed in, suddenly, like I know around us, we get an incentive to have the power company be able to control our thermostat in our house to save energy, right? Like if you're not home, we can do these things and blah, blah. If I can change what our power station thinks is the ambient temp or the outside temperature, I can get it to do things with other, I can have actual kinetic effects just affecting those sensors and what data is being supplied into the system.
Absolutely. We did a test a number of years ago into data poisoning. So data poisoning is
data poisoning.
What we're talking. Right. So this is really where you get into, and we actually did a simulation DDoS attack on a data center, and it was actually playing around with the HVAC system that the servers were set up to shut down once it hit about 35, 36 degrees Celsius. And ultimately what we did was basically just increase the heat.
Right.
And that ended up having a DDoS effect because all of the servers that started hitting that temperature had an automatic shutdown in order to prevent failures and overheating and burn of chips and the board. So you can have, there is a connected effect. And I remember even we looked at, it was the entertainment system. I love Chris Roberts' explanation, a lot of the entertainment systems from the airlines. And of course, his challenges with flying from his comments. In research, but we get into is that it's these sensor connections. It's the data sharing portion. Is that you might have air gap systems, but sometimes that data sharing can have influence. So things like an airline entertainment systems, if it's on the same part of the network as what's the safety systems, let's say air pressure loss or cabin pressure drops, then that can have an effect actually into the actually main system, which actually then controls the planes. Because it says air pressure in the cabin's lost, therefore, basically, we need to descend to a lower location. It doesn't mean that you have the ability to control flights and really, but it allows you to have an impact on the main systems through data poisoning, through that data manipulation.
Yeah, and that was one of the attacks on cars as well. Was through the entertainment system was connected to the CAN bus, and then you're able to poison what's going on in there. And we'll probably talk about cars some other time.
I've got my CAN bus sitting behind me here in the show.
Yeah, but that's one of the big challenges. It was like when I was able to get into the Boeing systems and into the flight control software and the aviation ID system, both live and test, is they'd already had a problem with a sensor poorly coded that brought down at least most likely 3 aircraft. Yes. There was actually one earlier here in the Netherlands. And the problem is if you can get into those systems and then you can do any sort of poisoning, manipulation, and so forth, then you can mislead sensors. Yes. You can change the way things go. And our world is so automated that even large aircraft, they are driven or flown, I should say, a lot more in a controlled manner, not involving a pilot or a co-pilot. And it tries to do all these lovely automatic things, just like my lovely espresso machine. But the chances of my espresso machine killing me is much lower than, for instance, one of these modern aircraft.
Until it can load its own ingredients and grabs the cyanide from the cupboard.
Right. Until it does that.
Right. And I think I insulted your espresso machine earlier, calling it a latte machine. I really apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It also has the milk thing. It's that fancy.
It's very fancy.
One year. It's great.
But even, we're talking about espresso machines. You can even get into medical devices that does automatic prescriptions.
Oh.
And, even, IV treatments or whatever you might be getting, in hospitals.
Oh, I had a friend who was telling me about, I think there's heart, pacemakers that are actually you can connect to them.
Connected to Bluetooth connected.
Yeah.
That's scary proposition.
John Hopkins made one of those devices and was eventually fined, which also brings up a good point. I live in the Netherlands. And we had the first, cyber laws related to responsibilities of companies and also responsibilities of security researchers. Where if, for instance, I happen to find a wide gaping open hole in your systems because you didn't apply general basic to best practices, depending on the level of criticality, then I am not prosecuted and you can't sue me.
That's awesome.
And
whistleblower, it needs to be protected.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Is there any movement towards also, if you find that stuff, holding you somewhat responsible for disclosing it?
What is in the guidelines is that you attempt to try to responsibly disclose it, but you have to use a secure manner. Right. And if the company does not have a vulnerability disclosure program, this is one of the issues I ran into with Boeing, because they actually have, they take advantage of our Dutch tax system. So they push all of their money through the Netherlands. And they did not have a vulnerability disclosure program at the time. And so the Dutch government is looking at fining them currently for doing that. But at the same time, a security researcher can attempt to contact them, obviously use it, securely. So you don't want, all of your proof of concept stuff out there or personally identifiable information. But then we also have, luckily, a mature cert system that can then intervene in the matter.
Right. That's awesome. Because I remember going back a couple of years ago when I was kind of more in my days of daily penetration testing, we had a massive roundtable discussion, and it was going into responsible disclosure about types of OT vulnerabilities and system vulnerabilities. And in the room was we had Europol, we had certs, we had law enforcement, and we also had businesses. And the problem is that, I'm really happy to hear that at least you have a proper whistleblower type of scenario, because when you get into security researchers, all too often, when they report these types of vulnerabilities, they end up becoming the target of basically lawsuits. And they end up becoming criminalized by some of the gray laws that's around and become, victims of being targeted because of disclosing potentially, damaging vulnerabilities. And we see this all too often. And I'm so happy that there's a protection, because at the end of the day, security researchers are basically, we need their help in finding these. And there are actually many amazing people who are using their skills for good reasons. And they're putting themselves at risk in many cases to find these vulnerabilities and disclose them. And I think it's important that they get knowledge, because when we had this round table, that the law enforcement said, what you're doing is, of course, you're in the gray area of the law, but what the best thing to do is disclose it anonymously. And of course, these people are putting in their hard time, effort, and they're not going to get any money. It's more about recognition, acknowledgement for their efforts. And I think it's really important that we actually, use their help. We work together, because I think it's important to get security researchers and government agencies and officials and law enforcement and the companies that work together in order to provide a much more responsible disclosure efforts without victimizing those who's doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, I find it mind-boggling that you wouldn't have some sort of responsible disclosure program, some way for people to report things into you that's in a controlled way, and you can handle and has a process. Was one of the first things we did I did after I got here. We set something up, and it's been great for all of the annoyances of people reporting things that really aren't an issue. It's definitely paid off, and I find it hard to believe that a large company wouldn't have that set up and wouldn't want to know. And I think you were also talking about the laws. It's not operating in the gray area. Again, that gets back to what I was saying earlier, right? It's illegal to tamper with a DVD player because there's encryption in there and right. And so because of the laws, at least in the US, it does make it, if you want to do some of the work that you want to do, it's actually illegal to do it. Or criminalized in a way. And so it's, I find it frustrating from that perspective. I'm sure many people do.
And that's how I look at GDPR. It's digital rights management for citizens, personal information.
Right.
And that's ultimately what, the intention is that DRM has been abused against citizens for many years. And now, GDPR is a DRM for the people. And I think that's definitely something, that leverages. And I know, Chris, you were, I think, about some of the IP that you create. That we create, it's things that's in our heads, and those are things that we own. You can't put intellectual property in people's brains. Maybe
Not
the
yet.
content that gets outputted, what you get in the result, the final result, but the method of getting there, the data, that's something that we have to protect, and that's something that is people own. So bringing it to kind of round up a summary is that I think, one is, we look at OT is all around us. It's been all around us for many years. It's technology innovation, which is really, making the communication and how these devices talk to each other, how they make decisions, and ultimately making our lives a lot more better. I think that, we have to take this with accountability and responsibility. I think it's really great to see governments and vendors around the world working to come together to provide some type of transparency and sharing a mechanism to reduce the vulnerabilities and exploits. And I think, Chris, some of the work you're doing around the proactive side, I think that's crucial. Right. I think, we can't live in a reactive world. We have to think about the direction we're going. And I think that's really important. And Mike, to your point around responsible disclosure and the laws that protects those, I think is really critical. And organizations should have, especially OT companies, should have a responsible disclosure capability where they have an open door policy for researchers to provide them information that they find, and having protection of it's a whistleblower scenario that they're finding and discovering. So, Chris, any closing thoughts? Anything you want to share with our audience, our very international audience that we have? What things that you think? Where's the future? Where's the direction we're going? What would it be like in a couple of years' time?
Well, I think more and more of us will be working remotely and having that option, which means that more and more things are going to be incorporated into our daily lives. We're going to be looking at more and more drone deliveries, robot deliveries, things that we can digitize to make our lives as easy as possible. And it's going to accelerate because of our current circumstance in 2020, which seems to be very determined to try to kill us. So we're going to see a very fast acceleration, but I would, you guys had mentioned buzzword bingo. I would be more concerned with the acceleration, the security of the acceleration of the OT world than I would be with artificial intelligence, Bitcoin, and quantum computing. Did I miss a buzzword?
Machine learning.
Machine learning.
Machine learning. Well, it's part of artificial intelligence.
It's part of artificial intelligence, right?
Quasi prime numbers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Forgot about them from last year.
The snake oil.
Yeah.
I still love it. Sometimes
man.
when I need a good laugh, I go back and watch it again.
It's scary, hilarious. Yeah. Whew, that was something. But yeah, I mean, there are certain things obviously we do need to be concerned about. But realistically, we need to be concerned about the things that touch right now our everyday lives, and that is different types of OT.
Absolutely. I did see one time recently here in Estonia, we have the automated deliveries, which is the Starship delivery systems, and we also have these smart connected scooters. And there's a great image, I'll have to share it with you, that they're fighting with each other.
Awesome.
It was almost like the robot wars. It was like two devices trying to get past. It was quite funny. So Mike, yourself, any closing words, anything that you think that we should have as a kind of reminder or summary?
No, I think we've summed it up pretty well, but I do think, just recognizing, I think there is a lot of responsibility on companies to set up, as we said, responsible disclosure programs, doing testing, bringing security people in to every step, that it's not enough to just sort of rely on your supply chain to say, yeah, no, we've got it secured, or here's the documentation. I mean, I've looked through plenty of SOC 2 reports and been like, okay, that's all well and good, but it doesn't explain how specifically you do this, this, and this. And I have questions and concerns that are not addressed in this. So you can't just have, we have all the documentation, we have everything we need. There needs to be people really looking through that and advising all the way across. It's technologists, it's security people. That cross-section of security technologists that looks at things of how does it break? I mean, as an engineer, I know how to build things really well. And I found, most software developers are good at building things. Very few are good about thinking about how to knock them down or how they might get knocked down or so on and so forth. And so there's a different mindset, and getting those people involved in these discussions and decisions is a critical thing.
Absolutely. Collaboration and communication and privacy and security by design is the crucial things that we need to get to.
Yes.
So awesome. So it's been a pleasure. This has been a fantastic show. And hopefully our listeners have really been educated and had a lot of fun. And, tune in sometime soon. We'll have the buzzword bingo for sure. We'll come up with the buzzword bingo and see who wins. We'll have maybe a little prize at the end of it. And maybe the audience can even join in. Yeah. But again, it's been a pleasure having you both. Chris, amazing to chat with you and get your insights. It's been very educational for me. So this show, we happen every 2 weeks. So tune in, subscribe to us, find a way to get this podcast automated and to your phone or to whatever device your preference is. This is going to be one of the first in this series of OT. We will do another number of shows that will go into things around elections and other types of really interesting and fun topics. But again, Chris, many thanks for having the show. We hope to have you on again soon and chat more with you. It's been an awesome time, and hopefully the audience will have lots of fun and be educated. Thank you.
Happy fun time.
Take it easy. Great talking to you, Chris. I always enjoy it.
Great talking to you.